Hello everyone, welcome back to the KMTRADERS channel. So this is the full market analysis volume 137. What we're going to be doing is looking at the week ahead and compare analysis from the last few videos or so. So we're going to be looking into gold. So we can see that essentially 1680 has been broken. I've been waiting for that for quite a while now. So essentially what I really want to start gearing up for is pretty much a turnover in price. So as I can see that I've got some reversal patterns forming, or pretty much indication in my arrows. So pretty much might as well just get rid of all of this annotations for now, because what I'm going to be waiting for pretty much is this huge turnover in price. I believe that the FOMC may be the kick-in start towards the upside rally. I believe that there is a turnover point coming very soon in which price could take out the highs of gold, so essentially reaching above the 2100 mark. So yeah, as you can see, we've got a long way to go if we do see price starting to rally up. But yeah, obviously wild accusations right now, but we just need to wait for the price to kind of switch over, and FOMC, NFP can also be the instigator for the whole kind of move switching up to the upside. So we'll just kind of see where price is going in the long term. But as of now, we can see prices pretty much into the 1680 area. We just need to see price exhaust to the downside before it switches over. So in theory, sells are still valid, because this can still keep going lower and lower, but we just need to wait until price kind of shifts ultimately in momentum. Then we can just kind of catch on the bandwagon to the upside. So that's my kind of thoughts with gold. If we move on to EU, so what we can see here is that we were waiting for pretty much a turnover to the downside and then a pop to the upside. So we can see that had kind of played out quite nicely. So my thoughts for this week is pretty much the idea that we could be stepping up in one or two directions. So we're either going to be continuating a low, or we will be either pushing up higher. So my kind of barrier for the buy scenario is going to be this, so 1.02. But for now I'm still quite interested in taking some sells. So we'll see where that can happen and if that can take place. But if we do break above 102, then I'll be looking at some buy situations. Okay, so if we move on to NU, so as you can see here, was looking at 0.6 or 0.61, waiting for a turnover. So there were two scenarios, I believe, that we spoke about. Is that if 0.61 was to hold as support, we would get that rally, but obviously we really didn't see any kind of turning point from there. But we moved on to the second scenario in which we would get a break from 0.61, and we can see price pushing lower. So we're pretty much at this point right now. So essentially what we need to do is wait for the spring, pretty much to the upside, pretty much just a nice push in momentum, to indicate that price is switching over. But as of now, we're still looking at possible sells. So tying in with EU and gold, we're just kind of waiting for sells to exhaust before we switch over to the upside. And I think again with this we could be pushing aggressively higher, so we just need to wait for that momentum to kick in. So I believe the same kind of concept is going to apply to AU. So again, 0.67, we waited for that for support, but obviously failed and kind of had some sort of rejection, gave you a few pips to the upside, but it just had it basically had cleaned out back end of last week. So essentially we're looking at this kind of scenario where we're just waiting for the exhaustion of the sales before we get that switch over. So I probably will actually keep this annotation. I quite like this one. So we could be looking at pretty much sells still. I'd imagine sells would be on the higher side of price, but if I am going to look for buys, I'm going to be waiting for that momentum, but we need to wait for that to come into play. So that's pretty much with the US dollar pairs. So if we start to look into the Japanese yen pairs, so my thoughts with this is pretty much quite the reverse of the US dollar, well, for UJ in particular. So if we just draw this trend line up, kind of just seeing price respect it, but essentially what I'm waiting for is this turnover in price. I believe I was speaking about this, or the anticipation of price turning over at some point. Regardless of that, I think the 140 level, I was speaking about this as being a level of resistance. Clearly we've broken through, so now we're just waiting for some retests and whatnot. But I'm still keen to see this kind of swivel and turn over to the downside. So we just need to wait, kind of respond to what's actually happening within the within the candlesticks. So if we do see that big strong move to the downside, then we can probably start thinking about switching our bias to the downside. So I am still looking at some sells for this, but again, we just need to wait for that momentum to kick in. So around this area here, we can see like there's going to be a build up in price, so there is going to be some choppy behavior. So it could still push up very high, it could still gradually push up and then have that shocking turnover to the downside essentially. And I think the main turning point, it really is going to be obviously a little bit soon, possibly into October, and that could be correlating with all the other US dollar pairs. But obviously because this is a US dollar Japanese yen kind of flip, there are going to be some similarities within the US dollar, but it's interesting to see the correlation between the Japanese yen now. So that's my kind of outlook for the next few days or so. I'm just pretty much just waiting for this turnover really. So if we take a look into CJ, so with this, I'm actually waiting for price to make its way towards the upside a little bit. I'm looking for price to head into a 111, and then I'm expecting at least some sort of rejection, or obviously we don't necessarily know. We need to wait for the sell-off pressure to come in first before we can get any ideas of sells. But with that being said, as you know, price has still got a way to go up. We could be looking at some buy scenarios in which it could look something like this. Again, it's all kind of guesswork right now until we know day by day, but essentially I'm looking at a buy scenario, so it could just be like, you know, if it drops down, then get a break and retest kind of trade up. But again, this can move to the downside and swivel back up to the upside. So I'm going to be interested in seeing that, if I can fulfill that. If we look into EJ, I believe EJ was a similar kind of thought process. So again, I was looking at 142 as a kind of level of resistance, but we've clearly blown through that here, like so. So I might just leave that in, to be fair. Use it as a kind of support point, dynamic support. So what could happen is price, you know, eventually do something like this, switch to the upside, and then when we get to price to the upside, we're not really sure what's going to happen, but this is where we could potentially gear up some ideas and just kind of essentially watch for price and see what kind of happens above this area here, 146, because obviously it's unknown territory. So we just need to wait for some sort of sell-off pressure to come in before we start to see a potential kickoff to the downside, which I think is going to be quite strong. So I'm actually thinking that obviously there are some similarities with the Japanese yen, but I'll continue with the Japanese yen before I wrap up everything up. So in regards to AJ, I'm looking at, so I believe we looked at 97 as a resistance, but we've blown through that right now. So again, what I'm thinking with this particular pair is we could drop in a little bit deeper, maybe 95, and push up higher. I'm expecting some sort of, you know, because I'm following up from that kind of sell-off in price. But if we're able to turn over again, we could be looking at some sort of turnover again like that to the downside, which is obviously going to be a bit big. Well, it's going to be very big, but we need to wait for something like that to happen. And I'm going to use 93 as my support level. So if we break below this, And obviously if you go back in time, 93 is actually quite a strong support and resistance. Sorry, so quite a strong support and resistance zone to use. So I'm using this zone as a kind of barrier. So if we break below this, then I'm going to be looking for more kind of sell-off opportunities, like so, like a retest and continuation down. But that's my kind of thoughts for the Japanese yen pairs. So if we now move on to the last two US dollar pairs. So with this, what I've had in mind is I've actually got two kind of situations here. So I was looking, so we can see here that we expected kind of a turnover to the downside, which kind of played out quite well. So I might use, so I'm going to be using this annotation still. So the idea is that we could expect price to drop into 94. So obviously still a long way to go. But if we do break above here, so 99, 0.99, there is a possible, scenario where that could happen. Again, I don't think it will be this week, depending on how strong the FOMC is. But we could expect price to, really push up and move higher, and in which we could have to hope that we can get into some sort of a break and retest trade, and hope that it can push higher and break out of this kind of sideways channel. So that's my kind of thoughts with that. So we'll either get a drop off in price to take out 94, and then we can get a swivel to the upside, or we will push up higher. So ultimately we're kind of pushing higher essentially. And finally with USD CAD, so my thoughts with this is that I think we're going to be pushing up higher still. So I was looking at 132 as a kind of resistance level, but as you can see, price didn't really necessarily hold that. Might as well keep that in actually. Yeah, so we can see price really just kind of just burst through that, so that's completely fine. What we can potentially see now is price arguably dropping lower and then pushing higher, and then if this does happen, I'm going to be looking out for seeing how strong price can really turn over. But I believe there could be a drop off in price very soon, which is going to be very strong. So that could be a possible scenario, but again, we don't really know, and this move here is not going to happen anytime soon. It's going to be more of a week by week process of piecing things little by little. So it's not going to be a quick and easy process. So essentially that's my kind of thoughts overall with the pairing so far for this week. I think that there is something weirdly brewing up on a long higher time frame perspective on all of the pairs, especially the US dollar and the Japanese yen pairs. I think there are major turnarounds coming soon that I'm noticing. So it'd be interesting to see what news is actually going to cause this, because obviously there has to be a big fundamental shift in order for price to really take a huge tangent and a huge flip. So yeah, worrying but very interesting at the same time. So that'll be all. We will be obviously looking at the charts on a day-by-day basis, but just keep all of my thoughts in practice and just keep analyzing the charts, like I say. So if you did find this video thoughtful and useful, make sure you leave a like, make sure you're subscribed, and we shall see you all in our next week's video.